And if you're outside a home fire, any medical emergency, suddenly your life could depend on the quick response of a rescue squad. And if you're outside of a major city, that emergency care will probably be provided by an unpaid volunteer. Tonight, in our Live at 5 close-up, a matter of life or death. Bill Bolini spends a day with one of the largest volunteer rescue squads in the state and finds they are ready for any emergency.
This is just one of the second alarmers emergency crews in action yesterday. The emergency call said a woman was having trouble breathing. It looked like a heart attack.
Please help me. Somebody help me.
Dr. Dillon, this is Adam Lewis from Second Alarmers. We're at a home in Roslyn with a 76-year-old female who has a history of cardiac trouble as well as mild COPD. Pain and dyspnea at this time and is very apprehensive.
In this case, they quickly stabilized the patient and transported her to the hospital. No real treatment on the scene was necessary.
Our functions out on the street as paramedics is to evaluate and relay to the hospital all the pertinent information that we think that they'll need to know to make a diagnosis. We're their eyes and ears out in the field. That's our basic job.
The Second Alarmers used to be what the name implies, an outfit that used to follow fire engines around and give them coffee when the second alarm rang. Well, that was back in 1938. Things have changed. The Second Alarmers have evolved into a crack medical team, an emergency team, and they literally stand between life and death.
They are based in the Willow Grove area and cover a large portion of Montgomery County. There are about 100 members and only 4 are paid. The bottom line is these 100 men and women have taken the responsibility of providing emergency care for over 160,000 residents. And most of those people never give them a thought until they need them.
I've lived in this community over 30 years, and they have always been here when we needed them. It's only since my mother has been ill this past year or so that we have used their services, but I know other people in the area that have used their services, and they're fantastic. The community is better because of them.
How quick do they arrive on the scene?
This time it was about 12 minutes, as best I could figure. Now, how can you beat that in this weather, from Willow Grove down to here and inside? They're fantastic.
The Second Alarmers are a highly trained force. Most are EMTs, emergency medical technicians. That means at least 81 hours of medical courses plus a state certification. Others who man the trucks and wagons are paramedics, and that requires a lot more training.
In order to be certified to ride one of the ambulances as an EMT, it would probably take you about 12, 13 months worth of training before you get to the level where you can ride in the back of an ambulance.
How about a paramedic?
Paramedics, an additional 200 to 300 hours worth of training, both in the hospital and in the classroom.
This is not a nickel and dime operation. They have 10 vehicles, 7 ambulances, 1 rescue wagon, a power and light truck, and of course, a canteen.
Even though the Second Alarmers is a volunteer outfit, they have a budget in excess of $200,000 a year. Money's a problem because they're a lot better at medical emergencies than they are at business. And here's why.
Private ambulance corps usually charge $100 or more for a ride to the hospital. The Second Alarmers charge only $75, but usually get only $50 if the person has insurance. If the patient doesn't pay, they get stuck, period. No bill collectors knock on your door. Most of their money comes from contributions, and most people in the community don't give.
Well, it's a matter of, I think everybody sits back and thinks that they'll never need us, and I just like them to know that when they do, we are here, and it doesn't matter whether or not they've supported us in the past.
Last year, these volunteers went out on over 6,000 calls. That's over 500 calls a month. That requires a lot of manpower, and it's always there, even if people have to volunteer anywhere from 20 to 80 hours a week.
After observing the Second Alarmers for a while, a question comes to mind right out of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and that is, who are those guys? And in this case, the answer is people. People just like you.
These 2 young men are students. Pat Grubb is a paid paramedic from 7 to 3, then volunteers for another 20 to 40 hours a week. Alex Levy is a cop for 8 hours, then a volunteer when he's off. The list goes on and on. If you are one of those people who think this is a social club, this mission might change your mind. The call said a man was found in the snow. It looked bad. Going in, the crew knew their skills would be tested to the limit. The battle against time and death was on, and spectators suddenly became helpers.
Start CPR, here's straight line, let's go.
Straight line again?
Abington, this is 350-37.
Go back and straight up.
Patient just went straight line again.
I say, if you see defib at the scene that you like to shock it, I already gave you that order. I am not getting a good fix for shock it.
All clear? All clear. Okay, check for a pulse, keep ventilating. Cut the tap. Check for a pulse. No pulse, continue CPR. Stop CPR a second. Check for pulses. He's got a rhythm. Check for pulses.
Yeah, I get a weak one.
We got pulses.
As you saw, they revived the heart and got a pulse, but they continued to work even while they transported this man to the hospital.
I feel right now that he stands a good chance of surviving because CPR was administered at the scene on the onset of his attack, which means that we have a very viable patient to work with.
I'm wondering about the emotional consequence. I know I was standing there saying to myself, breathe, you know, be okay. And I noticed myself getting involved. Do you get involved?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I sit there a lot of times saying, boy, I wish this guy would start pumping his own blood so we don't have to do any spontaneous respirations for a lot of reasons, but sometimes it's, you know, the inevitability of it is that not all of them are saved.
At the hospital, they worked on this man for 45 minutes.
I don't think there's that many people in the world that can say that they absolutely love their jobs to the point where they'd be willing to give their life for it.
You know, we tried as hard as we could to do all that we know how to do.
The unknown is probably half
God
the
just didn't want this gentleman to live, and that's about where it is.
Because we fly closer to the sky.
Well, unfortunately, they don't win all their battles, but they do win a lot. And the cold reality is many people who are walking around today owe their lives to volunteer companies just like the second alarmers. In this day where you hear and see so much of man's inhumanity to man, it's comforting to know volunteerism is still alive and well, and we all are better off for it. Larry.
Fascinating and revealing report, and I have one, I think, which is a very important question. What about the legal liability? Is there a legal problem?
Yeah, there is a legal problem, and it's hard to believe. If you or I came upon an accident, we help someone, we are under this Good Samaritan Act. Nothing can happen to us. But because these people went to school and learned how to help us, they are not covered under the Good Samaritan Act. And they are really angry about it. And there's a lot of volunteer people out there who are just as angry, and I think they have a tremendous cause.
So
they have to think twice about helping someone on the street. That shouldn't be. That should not be.
They're in danger of getting sued, huh?
Exactly. And they have wives and families, and they're doing it for nothing. And yet the state is discriminating against them.
Thank you, Bill.
Dr. Edwin Wood is with us. He is president of the Southeastern Pennsylvania chapter of the American Heart Association. We are talking all this week about your heart. Right now we're going to talk about a trauma unit. We want to show you what exactly a trauma unit does when they come to the rescue of a heart attack victim. This is a simulation. These are the second alarmers from Willow Grove, a trauma unit there. And this is what happens when we set up a situation of a man with a heart attack. Here he is raking leaves with his son. He's a fairly young man. I would say he's probably in his middle to late 30s. He feels the tightness in his chest and then falling to the ground.
Oh, my God. I think he's having a heart attack. Hello? Hello? Sir? Is this your father?
Yes, it is.
Wake up. Wake up.
Dad!
Go get an ambulance. Tell him cardiac arrest.
This heart attack victim is lucky because the jogger knows how to perform CPR. First, he attempts to revive the victim with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
I got an ambulance. I need CPR.
Good, good.
Now the victim's son takes over doing mouth-to-mouth, assisting the jogger in two-person CPR. The trauma unit is only moments away now and will take over the victim's care shortly. The two-person CPR continues with the victim's son and the jogger both remaining remarkably calm, which is very important. But there's cause for great concern because the victim shows no pulse. The situation requires the life support equipment that has just now arrived with the trauma unit.
I was jogging along here. He just got here. I found him like I don't know how long he's been there.
The first step is an electric shock with these paddles. Hopefully, this will restore his pulse and breathing. They do this twice, but the meter shows an irregular pulse, which means more drastic measures are needed for the patient's life support. So the trauma unit contacts the local hospital dispatcher for further instructions.
Abington, we have a male victim, his late 30s, he's out raking leaves. He's in full cardiac arrest at this time. CPR was initiated prior to our arrival. We have the patient intubated, requesting an order for an IV.
All right, go ahead and start the line. And with D5W, administer 1 amp of epinephrine, 2 amps of bicarb, circulate, defibrillate again.
10-4, Abington.
The trauma unit has the go-ahead to set up an IV and to administer special medications, which will hopefully revive the patient. By now, the scene has attracted the attention of the neighborhood. It's a good thing, too, of their neighbors. The jogger and the patient's son knew how to administer CPR. Even now, the jogger assists the trauma unit by holding the IV bag while medications are being set up. Finally, it's time to try electric shock one more time to try and get a normal pulse.
Clear.
The meter shows that it's worked this time. His pulse is stabilizing, and he now can be moved to the hospital.
10-4. Our ETA to your location is about 10 minutes.
As the neighbors watch, their friend is whisked away, his chances greatly enhanced by the efficient emergency care from the trauma unit. But also, and perhaps most importantly, his chances are great because his son and his neighbor, the jogger, knew what to do in an emergency. They knew CPR. All right, we have a CPR hotline number that we can give you if you're interested in getting some information about where you can learn CPR. There's the number right now, CPR hotline, 629-8-CPR, 629-8-CPR. All right, Dr. Wood, once the man gets to the hospital, what does the hospital do for him?
Well, he'd undoubtedly be taken to a coronary care unit where his heart rhythm could be monitored.
Two people who happen to be in the right place at just the right time. Let's go quickly now to Channel 10's Terry Ruggles, who's standing by at the Medical College of Pennsylvania with more on the still developing story. Ter?
You're right, Diane. We're at MCP because Helen Mitchell, the lady we're talking about, is inside right now. She is going to be okay, but this story is a perfect example of how precious life is and how every second counts. Early this afternoon, Helen Mitchell's car went careening out of control on the Boulevard extension. Fortunately, Jeffrey Fine and Patty Dissinger were driving close behind. Both nurses both saving Helen Mitchell's life. We asked the two to watch our Channel 10 video and explain what happened.
She had no pulse, and she was not breathing.
Fine started administering CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation.
Artificial respiration, blowing in the mouth, and compressing on the sternum to actually squeeze the heart between the sternum and the back.
While both nurses deal with life and death situations in the hospital every day, this was different.
Because you don't have things at your, your exposure. You can't call people and say, I need this right now. You just have to, it's like basics.
We did maybe about 10 compressions or so, and I saw her arm starting to move.
A Philadelphia rescue squad was on the scene within 5 minutes, but those 300 seconds were critical in Helen Mitchell's life.
If nobody had started CPR, she probably would have died.
Helen Mitchell told Dennis Waltering she doesn't remember a thing. Helen's niece, Jane Socia, says their family owes the two nurses a lot.
And did CPR, because other than that, she might not be here.
Yeah.
So for that, we're very thankful.
They're taking good care of me very well.
Quite a story once again, how precious life is and how just a few seconds can make a life or death difference. You know, Diane and Art, we have talked so much about CPR at Channel 10 and how it does make a difference. We've done specials on it, we've offered courses on it. Here's one more example how knowing CPR has saved a life. Tonight, Helen Mitchell is now gone from critical to stable condition. She's still inside, doctors are still watching her, and she's still not out of the woods yet, but she is alive.
So nice to start with such a good story.
Yes,
Thanks,
indeed.
Ter.
Okay.